So my name is Mel Groover, and I am the chapter organizing director for the Younger Women's Task Force of Greater Lafayette. YWTF is part of a coalition called Working Hoosiers Vote. So Working Hoosiers Vote Coalition is made up of YWTF, Indivisible, Greater Lafayette Immigrant Allies, and Showing Up for Racial Justice. And we're super excited to collaborate on a number of things, but in particular today to talk to you about navigating the voting process in the time of Corona. And so I guess we should just tell you up front that we are just happy to see your faces. And thanks for joining us in this way. And hopefully we'll help you navigate using this new system, but also with this new information. And so my job is just to intro our time together. So today what we're going to cover is we're going to cover absentee voting. We're going to cover some changes in some voting dates. And we're going to cover voter registration as well as making a plan to vote. And our hope is that you have enough information after this call that you can share this information to other folks in our community. And so if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to use the chat feature, and Matt's gonna curate those questions, and we have a Q&A portion towards the end of our call. And the way that we're going to, some other things that we wanna let you know is that you've probably already noticed, but Matt Geyer is looking like the fanciest and the most tech savvy, because just to really build trust with you that we know what we're doing on the tech end of things. And so Matt's going to be facilitating a lot of things, but there's also another screen called Matt Alt. So Matt's actually working two different screens today. And that is the live document that is linked in the chat as well. So you can see it on that screen. And if you want to spotlight that screen as we're talking about it, you can actually go up to it, click the ... next to it, and you can spotlight that screen where that's the one that you're looking at. And then, but you can always click it in the chat where the live document is so you can follow along. That's where we're going to be dropping some of the information that we're sharing, and we'll make sure you have access to it. Another thing is Margaret is captioning this call, which is why I'm trying to speak slower than I usually do, because this is our first time doing something where we are live captioning. So Margaret might sometimes verbally tell us to slow down, or we have some signals that she's going to use. But what the thing that you need to know is if you need access to a caption breakout session later. So if the caption is something that you need access to, if you can chat Matt directly for that, then he'll make sure that when he splits us up into breakouts, you get into the one with Margaret where she's live captioning, because we don't have enough people to caption each breakout. And then just know that we're gonna post a video of this call online with better captioning. Like, we're gonna make sure that any mistakes are corrected when we post it online. So we just wanted you to be able to be with us live. So other facilitators that are here with us, I've mentioned Matt, I mentioned Margaret, and also Chris from Indivisible, and then Jessica from YWTF. We're all facilitators today. And Jessica's actually gonna show you a way in which you can interact with our call. So maybe you saw our Facebook post about creating some of your own React images. So if you have some Post-it notes or some papers laying around, yes, thank you, Kat, for modeling that. Jessica's just gonna cycle through some of her favorite reactions that she has. And we really encourage you to do this because we find that this is a way for us to stay connected as well. I love that mute one. And then sometimes you might see an arrow if people need to speak up, you know, or, you know, get quieter, right? Okay, and then we just want to tell you that we're just like people, like we're just citizens just like you who are like just decided that we would spend more time learning about these changes so that we can spread the word. So like, we're not lawyers, we are not representatives of the election board. So we just want to say that, you know, so we're hopeful that we're giving you the most accurate information, even as things are changing. But we just want to remind you that like, this is not legal advice, etc. You know, so yes. And so the way, basically, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to spend some time with Chris. He's going to talk about a voting status update. And then Matt is going to tell us what's on our ballot in the primaries, right? This is beyond presidential folks in the ballot. So what's on our ballot locally? And then Jessica is going to help us talk through making our plans to vote now that we have more information. And then we're going to do some breakout rooms so we can workshop our plan to vote. And then we're going to come back together to do Q&A. So give me a thumbs up if that agenda works for you today. Nice. Okay, Chris, you want to take over?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me? Is everybody good? All right. I'm seeing some thumbs up. Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much. My name is Chris Hagerty. I organize with Greater Lafayette Indivisible. And Mel was leading me in and saying that, you know, there might be some changes coming up to the election. And that is true. In fact, there already have been some changes. The biggest change that we've seen recently is that our primary election has been delayed. The primary that was scheduled to take place on May 5th has been moved back to June 2nd. And this was part of the governor's actions as part of the extending the state of emergency due to coronavirus. So we are looking at a June 2nd election date, and the Indiana Board of Elections is going to meet on March 25th to really finalize these election dates insofar as we can finalize them in this situation, and to consider no-fault absentee voting by mail for the primary election, as well as some other changes that might need to be made to in-person voting, early voting, and absentee voting. It's so I just want to preface all of the dates that I'm going to give you and all of the dates that are going up in the live doc. These are all very tentative and are based on the assumption that the voter registration deadline and the early voting date and the absentee ballot deadline will all be the same distance from June 2nd, the new election date, as they would be if they were with the other election date, as if it were on May 5th. So, so we're going to see maybe some changes to how this works out going forward, but we do think that with the June 2nd election date, that the voter registration deadline would then be May 4th, with early voting starting May 5th. The absentee ballot deadline for the current, if the election were on May 5th, that would have been on April 23rd. It would be June 21st, or I'm sorry, May 21st under the new election system, if the dates are kept the same. However, there's no guarantee that the the state election division will not change these dates. So we'll be watching those dates really closely to make sure that those don't change. But we do know that on the 25th, the election board is meeting, the state election board is meeting, and that we will definitely have more information about those dates at that time. But those are just dates that we penciled in to make sure that, you know, we're prepared for dates in that ballpark. I also have some updates from the Tippecanoe election board. These updates were from the 17th, so they will probably be updated further by the local election board. I've been given to understand that they're going to be meeting again very soon, and they'll be working on their contingency plans moving forward as well. The election board first is suggesting that for all of the mailing done, so all the mailing that for absentee balloting, which we're going to get into soon, that the turnaround for first class mail is at least 3 to 5 days. So if you're mailing anything, please make sure you're doing it 5 days in advance. The election board is mailing ballots to voters once they receive their completed applications. So once you fill out that application and send it to the Tippecanoe County Board of Elections, they should be sending you back a ballot. And those ballots must be marked and returned to the election board by noon on election day, either by mail or dropped off at their office by the voter themselves or a member of the voter's household. As of last week, the Board of Elections was still encouraging healthy voters to vote early in person at the Tippecanoe County Board of Elections, which is at 20 North 3rd Street in Lafayette. There's one modification that the local Board of Elections approved, and that was that folks over 60 or at risk for the virus can choose the "I have a specific reasonable expectation of being absent from the county on election day during the entire 12 hours that the polls are open" option when filling out the absentee ballot form under the local election board's ruling. People over 65 are automatically eligible to vote absentee and may choose that reason as well. So those are just some updates on the front end before we get into the process of voter registration and how we get to those deadlines and how we achieve those actions by the right dates. So to start out, we're going to look at voter registration, because this is the most important part of getting into the process. If you can't, if you aren't registered to vote, you can't request an absentee ballot. So it's really important that everybody is registered to vote. So we're going to go over 2 ways to register to vote, and those are online through TurboVote and using the federal voter registration form. So first, we're going to get into the TurboVote, and I'm going to screen share that for you. So that will be up on my screen in just a moment. All right, here we are. In just a second, I should be sharing the whole thing. All right, so you should be seeing the TurboVote screen. Is everybody seeing that? Some thumbs up. All right, thank you so much. All right, and so TurboVote is a service that we use at Greater Lafayette Indivisible to register voters online. It also allows us to get people absentee ballots, and most importantly, updates about the date and election times. So in situations like the primary election, where we might not know what the election date is with certainty, TurboVote is really useful because they will keep us updated on that. So in order to get started, we just hit the Get Started button, and then it's just going to ask us some information. So I'm going to put in my name. I've already done this before, so it's just going to take me a moment. And then it asks you some information about how to get a hold of you. Typically, text message and email are both great. Email because or text message because it allows you to get text alerts, and email because there might be some information that's better given through email, like absentee ballots, or absentee ballot requests, which we'll get to in a moment. And then you can opt in or out to our national organization's email list. They send updates about progressive political actions that you can take and ways to get involved with them. The next page is asking us if we're registered to vote. I know that I'm registered to vote. So, right. So I can click yes here. If you're not sure, that's fine. You can put in your address and it will put you through to the state voter registration site. And I'll bring that up for you in just a moment. And this will finish the process for you. The Indiana voters site that TurboVote links to just requires your driver's license number and your name and address in order to, or sorry, excuse me, just your driver's license number and name in order to register to vote online. And if you have those things, you can register to vote and do the process that way. However, if you don't have a driver's license, an Indiana driver's license, that is, excuse me, you can't register to vote online. And that's kind of a shortcoming of the electoral system or the voter registration system that nobody is happy with. But fortunately, through TurboVote, you can also sorry about this. I can't minimize my screen right now because I'm recording. You can also find a voter registration application. So we're going to go through the paper voter registration application so that folks know how to fill that in. And this is very similar to the information that's asked when you register to vote online. So the first two questions that are always asked, oh, hang on, I need to share this with you. Got a little bit ahead of myself. All right, here we are. This is the National Voter Registration Application. If you've registered voters with Indivisible or with other organizations in town, this should look very, very familiar to you. This is the form that will allow you to register to vote anywhere in the United States. One of the reasons that we use it is that it's a bit easier for us to use. There are fewer requirements on our end when we're using it, but it's also easy to use for folks who are registering. So the first couple of questions are required. A lot of times people forget these questions. It's, are you a citizen of the United States? Will you be 18 years old on election day? As the instructions say, if you check no, don't complete the form. And as for these forms, even though I'm showing you this form online, they can't be filled out online. The forms for voter registration, and later when we get to absentee balloting, those all have to be filled out by hand and either mailed in the case of the voter registration form, or emailed, mailed, or hand delivered, emailed, mailed, or hand delivered in the case of the absentee ballot request form, which we'll get to in a moment. So for this form, what we're going to want to do is continue filling out this form as it applies to folks. One of the common things that we see is that people mix up their date of birth and their current date boxes, so make sure you get those right. We always ask that if you are filling this in, you do fill in your telephone number. It's really important that the Board of Elections is able to get a hold of you. And if you are mailing in a form, the telephone number is kind of the easiest way for them to get a hold of you, especially during the election season. They are not going to put in extra effort to track you down if you don't give them your telephone number. So please, please, please put in your telephone number in that box. One of the reasons, actually the reason that folks without an Indiana driver's license can use these forms easily is that they allow you to use the last 4 digits of your social security number in box 6. So that's your ID number. And this makes it so that folks can use their last 4 of their social to register to vote. And then after that, you just need to sign it and date it. There are some sections that apply to certain folks. If you're experiencing homelessness on a regular basis and you don't have like a place where you like normally live, those folks can mark out an area and name a place using the map in section C. If you registered before, the Board of Elections really appreciates it if you put your old registration in box B so they know to cancel that one. And in box A, if you were doing a change of name, they'd like to know your name before you change it. And this is just kind of a box we don't use very often, but if someone is not able to sign their voter registration form for themselves and you're filling it out for them, sign it and fill out your own address and contact information so the Board of Elections can get back to you. The federal voter registration application is really important, not only if you don't have access to an Indiana state ID, but for folks who you might know who might not have access to an Indiana state ID. So perhaps maybe some elderly folks who you know or people in the community who don't have an Indiana state ID, this is the form that those people need to get, and they can get it through TurboVote. The Tippecanoe County Board of Elections will also mail these forms to you. So whether they'll email you the federal form or the state form, which is very similar, just follow the instructions and send it back. And their contact info is up in the live doc as well. All right. Okay, moving on. One thing that we've had a lot of concern about is absentee voting. As you might know, in Indiana, we do not have no-fault absentee voting. If you would like to vote by mail from home, which is what absentee voting is very similar to, then you must request an absentee ballot ahead of time. And you must have a reason for doing so. So I wanted to go through the absentee ballot requirements as they are right now. Those absentee ballot requirements have not been changed as of yet. So if you're filling out an absentee ballot right now, you need to follow the requirements put down in the absentee ballot. As I mentioned before, the State Board of Elections is meeting on the 25th, and one of the things they will consider is no-fault absentee voting. And if that's the case, we'll have information from our local Board of Elections and Voter Registration within the next few days about how they're going to effectuate that. It might be that folks just don't fill out a box, right? So people just fill out the absentee ballot request and don't fill out a box. It might be that they all are asked to fill out a specific box. We don't know yet. But either way, let's take a look at the absentee ballot request form. These forms are being accepted. They will still be accepted throughout the election season, even if the dates change. So that's kind of important to keep in mind, is that the Board of Election and Registration will honor these forms, even though they say the election date is the primary election is May 5th. So that's kind of important to keep in mind for these forms. And now let's take a look at it. All right. Can everybody see the wonderful application for absentee ballot by mail only in 2020? Everybody seeing that? Cool, cool. Awesome. All right. So the instructions are fairly simple. You have to complete and return the application so that it is received by the county election board at least 12 days before election day. The deadline, if the election were May 5th, would have been April 23rd by 11:59 p.m. For the November 3rd general election, which we aren't anticipating to change, the deadline to receive would be October 22nd by 11:59. The application can be mailed, emailed, faxed, or hand delivered, and the information for reaching the Tippecanoe County Board of Elections and Registration is on the second page. Scrolling down to it right now. And we also have their email address in the live document. All right. I'm going to move this window a little bit because it is on the wrong side of the screen. All right. So the information that the absentee ballot asks is fairly similar to the information that's asked on the voter registration form. So it'll ask your name, it'll ask your date of birth, it'll ask the last 4 digits of your social security number, although that's optional. If you change your name since you registered to vote, this will also update your voter registration if you use the change of name form. And then you also need the address at which you are already registered to vote. And then again, for things that involving the election board and elections, even though it says optional, please include your telephone number. It makes things a lot easier for folks on the election board side of things. So for this, if you want your absentee ballot mailed to a different address, you need to specify that in box 2. Again, with all of these forms, please make sure that you're filling these forms out, that you're printing them out, and then filling them out, and then signing them in ink. Please don't use an auto signer or fill them in by a computer, because those forms won't be accepted. All right. There's some details about our primary elections. Under state law, we actually request primary ballots under a party. That's how you declare your party. You don't do it in voter registration like you do in some states. You have to apply for a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot. In this county, both of the major parties have contested races. So whichever party you want to vote for, that's up to you. And now we're going to get into box 4. Box 4 is probably the most daunting part of the absentee by mail application, because some of these reasons aren't necessarily the most clear to voters. So We're just going to look at these real quick. The first reason is I have a specific reasonable expectation of being absent from the county on election day during the entire 12 hours that the polls are open. Number 2, I will be confined to my residence, a healthcare facility, or a hospital due to illness or injury during the entire 12 hours that the polls are open. This is a situation that folks may very well find themselves in due to COVID-19 or fear of being contagious after being infected with COVID-19. Additionally, there's also a caretaker reason. That's box number 3. I will be caring for an individual confined to a private residence due to illness or injury during the entire 12 hours that the polls are open. Additionally, voters with disabilities and voters who are over 65 years of age are entitled to vote absentee by mail. If you have election duties, if you work the entire time that the polls are open on election day, or if you're unable to vote because of a religious holiday, you're also able to file for an absentee ballot. If you're a member of the military or a public safety officer, a serious sex offender, or you're prevented from voting due to the unavailability of transportation, you may also apply for an absentee ballot. One update that we got from the parties this morning actually was that the Tippecanoe County Board of Elections has chosen to interpret the absentee the current state of emergency to allow folks over the age of 60 to claim an absentee ballot, and they were suggesting that folks use the reasoning that that they would be absent from the county on election day during the entire 12 hours that the polls are open. So if you're over 60 or over 65, if you're over 60, you can use the absent from the county option. If you're over 65, you have an option for yourself. If this changes, and it may change on the 25th, we're not exactly sure what this will mean in terms of how folks will fill out the form. So it might be that you just don't fill out box 4 at all, and it might be that you just fill out a specific box, or you fill out whichever box you feel like filling out. So so stay tuned for that type of information, because we will be sending that information out through our Facebook and our email chain and our other media properties. All right, so after you fill out this, after you print out this application, you fill it out, you can either mail it, email it, fax it, or hand deliver it to the Board of Elections. If you are mailing it, please give it 5 days to get in. We don't exactly know when the absentee ballot deadline is, but it is not for a while. So if you fill out a request for an absentee ballot now, you will be in good hands, and you'll be taken care of. And again, if you fill these things out early and get on top of these things and get them done early, if the Board of Elections has problems processing your absentee ballot or your voter registration or whatever form you're sending in, it's a lot easier for them to get to you. All right. I'm going to stop sharing with you all in more ways than one, because this is the end of the information that I have for you about the potential changes to the election dates and some information about voter registration and the absentee balloting process. One thing to finish off the absentee ballot process, after your application for an absentee ballot is approved, the Board of Elections will send you an absentee ballot. It has instructions on the ballot as to how you fill out the ballot and how you mail it in. The absentee ballots always need to arrive at your Tippecanoe County Board of Elections if you're in Tippecanoe County, or your local county election board if you're in a different county. Those need to arrive on election day, depending on which county you're in, either by noon or by the end of the day, or by 5 p.m. In Tippecanoe County, we need ours in by noon. So so please make sure to give yourself 5 days out from election day to hand in your absentee ballot, and please get them done as quickly as possible. Don't let them sit around. All right. So we have a lot more information for you, and I just wanted to thank you all for your patience today. I know that that's kind of a lot of stuff to absorb in a short period of time, and y'all have really done a great job sitting through that. So thank you all so much. Woo. Thank you, thank you. All right, so now I am passing passing off to, sorry, I have to look at mine.
It's going to be Matt.
It's going to be Matt. Thank you, Mel.
What's on the ballot? And as a reminder, if you, we're seeing some really good questions in the chat. So just keep dropping those questions in the chat and we'll definitely cover all of them.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Can I get a thumbs up? All right, perfect. So I'm going to cover what's going to be on the primary ballot itself. So we do have contested primaries. There's not a ton of candidates that are contested or positions that are contested, but there are some. So I have them, if you look at the Mat Alt or the live document, I have them for each party because you have to declare when you have your primary ballot. You will have choices that you need to make. So whatever you feel is most impactful to you or that you care about the most is what you'll select. So for the Democratic ticket, we have contested for County Council at Large. And these are all the names of the people who are running for that seat. We also have Indiana House 25 is contested. And Indiana District 4, which is the giant district that we're all in probably. Then we also have on the Republican side, we have the County Council at Large as well. So that is a very sought after seat in both parties. And then for Indiana Senate seat 7 and Indiana District 4 is also contested, which currently our representative is Jim Baird. And so he's being primaried currently right now. And that is all the contested seats that we have right now. Everything else, there's other things that are there, but they're just nobody else is running for them or, from either party. And that you can look forward to potentially on your absentee ballot. And I'm going to hand it off to Jessica for how to make a plan.
Matt, can I just step in and say that all the information that Matt just shared, as well as more information about each of those candidates and what those roles do, is on vote411.org. So I just want to make that vote411.org plug for everyone.
Yeah, really good idea. And you can also get whatever races you actually have on there by plugging in your address.
Take it away, Jessica.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Mel. Can everyone hear me? Nice, nice. This is cool. Everybody's thumbs are just like, wing. We wanted to take a moment to kind of stop and think specifically about our voting plans because it's easy to take in all this information and then feel like, yeah, okay, cool. June 2nd, got it. For example, I'm planning to print out the absentee application the next time I am near a printer, which will probably be Tuesday, and have that ready. On the 25th, we'll have more instructions about how to send that in and what to do in box 4, for example. And then I'm planning to mail that in as soon as possible, as soon as we get that information after the meeting. So when we think about plans to vote, it's important to think about possible barriers that we might have to voting. And some of us may have changes in our lives right now, especially that we haven't actually given specific thought to, right? So thinking about, would you normally print it at work and are you no longer going to work? Thinking about if you're not driving around anywhere, are you not going to be driving past the post office like you thought you already were going to? So start thinking about if you want to have somebody in your community collect all of them and put them all in the mailbox at the same time. If you're quarantining for high-risk reasons, or if you are feeling sick, how you're going to make sure that somebody else can get that in for you. And then all of that being said, if early voting in person is still happening, which we'll know more details about, making sure that we know where you're going to the Board of Elections office, most likely, right? And how you're going to get there, your transportation, do you need a ride, things like that. So that was just my small plug that I wanted to do to have us thinking about this strategically as far as like what our real life boundaries might be and what type of questions we want to be asking when we're specifically making our plan, so that it's less of an idea of a thing that we're going to do and more of an actual agenda item on our calendar. So yeah, I think I talked a little quick for Margaret, so I'm going to pause for a moment. Sorry, Margaret. Sorry, y'all. Nice, thank you. Yeah, so next we wanted to do breakout groups, and in a smaller group setting, we wanted to talk through some of the boundaries and barriers that some people might be feeling around their vote plan, and collect any additional questions we wanted to add to the chat. Sometimes we find that while we're thinking through these things together, questions come to mind that we didn't think we had, like, how do I change my address associated with my voter registration, for example, if that's a thing I need to do, and if I'm not allowed to do that through the online portal, for example. Cool. So I'm going to pass to Matt's group making skills, I think.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. I'm going to, through Zoom, break people out into breakout sessions. So we're going to be with, I think we have 3 people facilitating this, and then the main room, which I will be in. And it'll be for 10 minutes, and then we're all going to come back and finish out the call, do the questions, and then send everybody on their way. So please bear with me while I get this all taken care of and everybody sorted to where they need to go. And if you need closed captioning, let me know. I'll make sure to put you in that room so you can get closed captioning.
So that's your sorting hat, Matt.
Yes, it is. If anything, if everybody wants to fill the time with anything, I have to make sure that all the...
Yeah, Matt, you let me know when you're ready, but I'll go ahead and take on some of the questions that people have been asking.
Sure.
Okay, so Amy David asks, if I early vote, do I have to put my grubby fingers on a touchscreen that hundreds of other people have touched as well? Yeah, so it also gets to the question that Celine's asked about, will there be in-person early voting opportunities? And the answer is yes, there will still be in-person early voting opportunities. But for example, I know Purdue had 2 locations that we had to actually cancel based off of Purdue policy. So the election board is working through where those backup sites for many of the places that they had in advance. So we'll know more about where and when, probably in the coming week. The other thing that the election board is working on is they are trying to figure out their plan for cleaning the machines, as well as the stylus that people can use. So what I would recommend is bringing a stylus of some sort to early voting, of your own, if you want to be super safe. And the way that our polling machines in Tippecanoe County work is it's not, it's pressure, not like it doesn't need, like, I don't really understand how styluses work, but really it's like if you have like a finger condom on or gloves or anything like that, you can still push it. It's like meant by the pressure. And I think the election board is also doing some experimentation with Q-tips to see if they can give people Q-tips to do that. So they're thinking through that process as well, which I appreciate that they're really looking through that. But if you want to stay as safe as possible, you might bring your own gloves. So Matt, are you ready, or do you want me to take another question?
Yes, I think I am ready. So I think I only have to move one person because I saw something in the chat, and I think we're ready to go now. Okay,
let's go. Break. Okay, it looks like we've all been transported back to the main room together. I hope no one was in the middle of any thoughts that they feel like they got cut off from. But we had a great conversation in our breakout, and I'm sure the rest of you did too. And I think that, Matt, we'd love to have some cues so we can give some A's. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay.
So, like I said, I will be reading these questions, but they're in that document for the facilitators of this if they want to open that up. So the first question we have is, I'm staying with my family out of state for a while. Am I allowed to vote absentee?
Yes.
Very definitive. Excellent.
This is a great question that I think sometimes it's like students experience this the opposite way a lot of times. Like if they're registered where their family lives, because they get two choices. If a lot of times they're registered where their family is, but they're in school during the election, they can vote absentee where their family is, or they can choose to register here and vote here. Now this is kind of the opposite situation, but that would be the first box on the thing. I will be out of the county all day for the whole 12 hours of election day. So you would check that first box for your reason. Is that correct, Chris?
Yes.
I'm gonna say yes.
I'm clicking through some things as well, so we're a little slow on the uptake. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
All right.
But
Second
yeah,
question.
If you're absent.
Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Nope.
Okay. Question 2. Are there going to be voting booths, poll stations to vote at during the pandemic? If so, is absentee voting our only option?
I think I can take that one. So far, all of the election authorities have been very adamant about this. There is going to continue to be in-person voting, both early and on election day. So presumably, we will still be using the same voting machines that we've been using. The counties will be using those voting machines as well. So yeah, there is still going to be that type of still that physical contact going on. However, the Board of Elections locally and boards of elections across the state and country are taking mitigation or are trying to do some mitigation around that. So you are going to see things like, putting out Q-tips so that people don't have to touch touch screens, or, minimizing the number of people who are allowed to be on the premises at a time. So you are going to see some things that will be different. And I'm just seeing a question that Yulissa put up. Do we currently know of a plan to spread out the booths and open new locations? We do not. I do know that the local Board of Elections is working on a plan, and that they will have that out comparatively soon, probably within the next week.
All right.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is just don't just assume that the place you voted in at before is going to be available. So just make sure that you're checking the locations, because they could change pretty quickly. Like if Payless shuts down, we don't have polling places in Payless anymore. So you're kind of it's a better bet to vote at the Board of Elections because it seems like they're committed to keeping that open no matter what.
Yeah.
Great. Question 3. Can you restate where to access the absentee ballot request form?
I think Chris dropped that in the chat, a link to that.
Great.
Yeah,
and we'll have a lot of that
link in the chat
information.
and in the live doc.
Yeah, it'll be in the live doc. We'll have a lot more information too following up. And this video of this conversation will be available to watch at your leisure or review. Are some of these primaries pick 2, specifically county council?
Actually, yes. That's actually a pick 3. The county council on both sides. Those are pick 3 out of 6. So if you're voting in either the Democratic or the Republican primary, you're going to be picking 3 out of 6 for county council. And some of them are right here. I'm not going to do that. Okay, I'm going to stop. Okay. But it's true.
My address is incorrect, but I don't have an Indiana ID. Is there a specific form I should be using to update since I can't do it online?
Okay, so for that, you would just be using the voter registration form. So you'd be updating your address using the federal voter or state voter registration form, because neither of those require an Indiana state ID. Those forms both just require the last 4 digits of your social security number.
And just make sure when you go to the polls, you bring either a passport, a military ID, or the Purdue ID that has an expiration date on it, depending on what you have.
This was dropped in there, but be sure to pick all 3 choices on your absentee ballot when you have it to make sure that you have all those. We have, do folks get absentee ballots denied for falsifying info, i.e. check you're working all day but don't have a job? How would they verify any of those boxes except age and military?
Okay, I told this in my small group, but I'm just going to tweet the subtext real quick. A lot of these are not enforced to the degree, like they are not going to, no. The Board of Elections is not going to go out and investigate you because they think that you may have been working or something like that, right? Like they're not going to send doctors out to confirm whether you were sick and stuff like that. So I think that like one thing that like we tell folks with like the medical things is that, you know, if you feel like you are not going to be able to be at the polls on election day because you are sick or you know, contagious or something like that, you know your body, right? So go on ahead, pull that absentee ballot request. You know, this is not a case of like you're going to see a lot of folks being, you know, very, very stringent with what they want to see. There is not, I believe, a protocol in place to actually look, you know, after folks for suspected violations of most of these types of things. So.
We have not so much a question, but a comment that I wanted to highlight. If you take the bus, City Bus has reduced routes because of COVID-19 currently. So if you're planning on going to vote in person at the moment, make sure you check those routes.
That is really good info, actually. That would be useful to let people know that.
There is one, I think we covered this. If I early vote, do I have to put my grubby fingers on a touch screen that hundreds of other people have touched? Yeah, I think we covered that.
Yes.
Bring a stylus or something so you don't have to do that. Somebody said, should I be worried about my voting status being inactive? It struck me as odd. I haven't seen info so far as explaining that. So inactive voting status.
Can I ask a clarifier? Feel free to unmute yourself, questioner. Are you saying that you looked up your voting status and it said you were inactive?
Hi, yeah, so basically what I did when we were talking, I was looking to see if I was registered to vote, and I'm registered to vote here for sure, and I voted here before, which is why it kind of struck me as odd that it says inactive next to voting status. So I don't know what that means, and I haven't been able to like find anything that explains that to me. So yeah, I don't know if it's something I should be worried about. I don't know if it's like, oh, you haven't voted this year or within a certain amount of time or something. I have no idea what to think about that.
Unless someone else on the panel has a direct answer to that, that's something we can look into and get back to you.
Thank you.
Margaret might have a direct answer.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, we do, even if you're registered here, you should definitely check your registration because we know that the state has gone through various voter purges. And one reason they do that is to determine like if you haven't voted in the last, 2 elections or whatever. So definitely check that registration status. I don't know that having an inactive status is a problem as long as you can still find your name and everything in the system. I don't know if Chris or someone else has a better answer for that.
I do know that if you're ever in doubt, you can always just fill in another voter registration form, and that should solve the problem. If not, you can contact the Board of Elections, the local Board of Elections, about that particular case. But in general, like if you have like a status that isn't inactive status, you can bring it back to active status by filling another voter registration form.
Great. Vote 411 is only showing the president on the races option. Do you all have a different way to see the other local races? Yes, I actually double checked this while we were there. It is only showing president on vote411.org. So you can get a list of the individual races from the Tippecanoe County Board of Elections website, and we will post a link to that in the live doc. that doesn't tell any particular information about the people or their stances or anything, but it does give a list of all the races that are currently for the
Matt, did you type in your address on
Yes.
411 and it still only said the presidential? Maybe Margaret has an update on this because she's connected to League of Women Voters.
Yes. So as far as I know, candidates were only requested to turn in their answers, or the deadline for turning in the answers was very recent. And it's possible that the local candidates just haven't been added to the system yet, and they haven't been published, let's say. So I think it will probably be added. They will probably be up soon. So keep checking.
Yeah, it says in the chat as well, 401 will be updated with info soon. So check back for that. Am I to understand correctly that I can scan a completed signed absentee request and email it to the county board?
Yes, absentee ballot requests can be emailed to the county election board. Yeah.
Do we currently know of a plan to spread out the booths and open new locations?
That's something that'll be covered by the local board of elections in the coming week or in the next couple of weeks.
I was visiting my brother in another state prior to the election in 2008. His county party was mailing absentee ballot requests to registered voters. Can we do this?
I think the parties can do that, right? I'm not sure if we have necessarily the resources to do that ourselves, but I do know that some parties have done that. But I mean, certainly there are definitely opportunities to get out the word about absentee balloting. One thing that could be useful would be asking the county or city elected officials. I know that in Indianapolis, Mayor Hogsett is going to be they're going to be mailing everybody an absentee ballot request form, all the registered voters. So that might be something to ask the electeds about.
Great. Can you clarify between the in-person and by mail absentee ballot request forms? Any important differences to keep in mind or recommendations between the two?
Okay, so absentee voting in person is a slightly different process. So that's I'm not as knowledgeable about that, but I do know that you can start that process by going to the local board of elections. In fact, I think that they're the only ones who have the forms for that. One other thing that's kind of important is that it's fairly similar to just voting absentee in person early at the board of elections or another place. There's also the board of elections can also talk to you about absentee voting by traveling board. That's if folks are grievously ill or absolutely unable to to get out to vote. They can request that folks from the election board, a bipartisan panel, comes and takes your vote, and you vote that way. But if you want more details about those types of voting scenarios, that's the board of elections can really help you out with those, because those are kind of done by them on a case-by-case basis.
I think the link in the live document now is to the in-person request form. So that might.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
All right, yeah, I can change that.
For students who are registered here but have been sent home, will they be able to have absentee ballots mailed to them? I'm assuming here, meaning Tippecanoe County.
Yes, this is dark mode of what they would otherwise do if they were registered back home, so it's just the inverse. So yes, they just have to request those. They have to request their ballot in the same way they would if they happen to be registered back home and at school here. It's just the flip. If they're registered here, they can get an absentee ballot to vote here. They cannot vote in both places.
What date should we put on absentee ballots for election and then blank blank 20 blank?
Those are instructions that we'll get from the State Board of Elections after the 25th when they meet about how to fill that out specifically. So as of right now, I really don't know.
And then so far, our last question, unless anybody has any to drop in the chat, will the Board of Elections meeting be live streamed at all?
We're not sure, but it wouldn't hurt to have community members contact the Board of Elections to say that that is something that they desire. I do think that the room that they meet in typically has the ability to do that. And they would just have to arrange it with IT in advance.
And that's all the questions that I have in my document.
Can I just say one more thing? If you have not filled out your census, you need to do so. So you can fill it out online for your whole household. So fill out the census. This is related and unrelated, but it would be having more of a moment, the census, if Corona was not having a moment. So give the census its 5-minute moment, fill it out, so we can get some of those funds to our communities.
And then that too, I will also drop in the sign-in link and the live document link for the last time. If you have not filled the sign-in form out, that'd be great. And then the live document will have all this information from this event going forward.
And if you made any reaction emojis, hold them up now so we can see them. Because maybe you were feeling too shy to use them during the call.
I see them. These are great.
That's good.
Keep them held up.
We're taking pics.
I love it. These are so good.
These are so good.
Well, shall we?
I think we shall.
All right. So is everybody comfortable giving this information to their friends, their family, and folks who they know, right? All right, cool. So we're gonna get everybody absentee ballot requests. People are gonna vote by absentee, or we're gonna vote early, and we're gonna minimize our risk of catching coronavirus through the electoral system. And we're gonna minimize the risk on our communities too, which is gonna be great. So awesome. We're all in this together, folks, you know.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming and spending your Sunday, part of your Sunday with us.
Oh, it's Sunday.
I know, it kind of blends together.
Anything else for anybody facilitating? Anybody else want to say anything? We good? All right. We'll see y'all later.